This video is about state court rules. So state court rules are often based on federal rules, but there are definitely differences from state to state. So what are the types of state court rules we might look for? Civil, criminal, rules of appellate procedure, and court-specific rules. Let's use Massachusetts as our example. So Massachusetts has 7 different trial level courts. All of them have their own rules. The Massachusetts Trial Court Law Library's website has links to all of the Massachusetts rules of court. So there's the civil, criminal, and appellate procedure rules we were talking about. And then it lists all the different courts in Massachusetts, including the SJC, Appeals Court, the Massachusetts Trial Court Rules of General Applicability, and then the various lower courts. In Massachusetts, the courts also have standing orders which could be applicable. And you can find those as well on the Massachusetts Trial Court Law Library site. For example, here are some Massachusetts Appeals Court standing orders. Let's just look at this first one, which is called Standing Order 17A. It has to do with the dismissal of appeals for lack of prosecution. And here's the order right here. So unannotated versions are often available on state websites, and we just looked at the Massachusetts Trial Court Law Library's page for those web links. If you were looking for court rules in a different state, you would have to look for a state trial court law library or look at the courts page for the state itself. Why would we look for state court rules on Westlaw or Lexis? Well, the reasons would be the same as what we talked about for federal rules. They're annotated, and also the searchability might be superior. So if you have access to Westlaw or Lexis, you're going to want to look at the rules there to look at the annotations. So let's look at Westlaw next first and use the table of contents to browse to the Massachusetts rules. So let's use Massachusetts as our example again. And you can see under statutes and court rules that we can link right to the statutes and court rules or right directly to the rules of civil or criminal procedure. And after the statutes, it lists all the Massachusetts rules, including civil procedure, criminal procedure, appellate procedure, and the rules of the various courts. So let's look at the Massachusetts Rules of Civil Procedure so that we can see some of those annotations. Let's look at Forms of Pleadings, Rule 10. You can see again, this looks like a statute pretty much. It has the currentness link here. It has editor's notes. And up at the top we have notes of decisions like we would see for a statute on Westlaw. The key cite references, history and citing references, and also context and analysis. So we can do the same thing on Lexis. I find it still to be easiest on Lexis.com, although you can find the annotated statute database on Lexis Advanced as well. So here's the path we would use to get to the court rules on Lexis. Let's take a quick look at it. So, and again, we'll use Massachusetts as our example here. And we're going to go statutes, regulations, administrative materials, and court rules. And we could look at the combined database, or we could say view more and go in by court rules. And once we get in here, if we wanted to look at the subheadings, we could go browse table of contents, and this gives us the various rules that are available on Lexis for Massachusetts. And again, these will be annotated like we looked at on Westlaw. They might not have the exact same annotations, but they will have annotated rules here. So another reason that we like looking at the court rules on Lexis or Westlaw is that we can use KeyCite and Shepard's, and this would help us lead to additional annotations. We saw the key citing feature where we were looking at the rule of civil procedure on Westlaw, let's look at it, the Shepard's results on Lexis. So again, let's go into the rules of civil procedure, and we'll look at pleadings and motions, and let's look at Rule 10, forms of pleadings. So let's look at this forms of pleadings, and the case annotations follow at the bottom, but let's look at the Shepard's results for this citation. And again, these are the different forms that the court has cited Rule 10. So to be very thorough, we'd have to look at all of these. But let's just look at 10 subsection C to give us a sense of what the Shepard's report looks like on Lexis. Another way we could update our court rules research is websites, cover amendments, and newspapers, newsletters, and blogs. For example, Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly publishes updates to the rules. Here is an example from the Massachusetts Appeals Court website. If we look in the announcements column, we see that there are some announcements that have to do with court rules. Just as with the federal court rules, oftentimes there are state practice materials that can help us when we're doing research in court rules. Let's use Massachusetts as our example again. So in Massachusetts, the Mass Practice series, which we've looked at before, has several volumes that has to do with court rules. These are just a couple. Volumes 6 and 7 are particular to rules practice. On Lexis, the treatise Massachusetts Pleading and Practice could be helpful. And also the Handbook of Civil Procedure in the Massachusetts District Courts is one that lawyers in Massachusetts refer to often. If you're in a different state, you would have to look for other secondary sources, see if there's something similar. So let's just take a quick look at the Mass Practice series on Westlaw. So on Westlaw, again, we're going to go State Materials, Massachusetts, Secondary Sources, Massachusetts Practice, and here you can see the rules practice in Massachusetts. And let's just go into the rules of civil procedure so that you can get a sense of what this looks like. And here's Rule 10, form of pleadings. And let's look at form of pleadings, asserted pleadings. And you can see this is set up like a secondary source. It talks about what the forms of an assertive pleading are. And then at the bottom we have footnotes to rules and cases. So one little quirk I wanted to mention in Massachusetts is that there's no code of evidence. So there is an SJC Massachusetts Guide to Evidence, which is available in print and online. And you can also find it on Lexis or Westlaw. In the same place that we saw those other rules, you'll see the Massachusetts Guide to Evidence. So this was a very brief video about finding state court rules. You can see that the procedure is pretty similar to what we did for federal court rules, but each state could be a little bit different, including those practice resources or something like this, where in Massachusetts there's no code of evidence. So you have to keep those differences in mind when you're looking for state court rules.